Good morning, New Zealand. I'm Chandler Farmer with the Kerman News Network, bringing you a breaking story as our sources inside Scandinavia have reported that the United Scandinavian Space Agency has launched a brand new probe to Moho. This new probe, named the Hermod 1, launching aboard a Vega rocket, achieved a successful orbit earlier today. Startlingly, our sources also indicate the United Scandinavian Space Agency's director has said, and I quote, New Zealand must no longer be allowed to hold uncontested rule over the final frontier. Today we are ensuring the fair use of space for Kerbals everywhere. We'll continue to bring you updates as the story develops. Hello there, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program New Zealand Reborn. And for once, I'm not actually starting in the mission control. I'm actually in the tracking station, obviously, with all the planets there. And I just wanted to show that I time warp past a bunch of birthdays for our Kerbals right there. So they are aging up. That is a mod I have installed. I think it's called Roster Manager. Not sure how well it works because it had a couple of problems earlier. But anyway, we have a resupply mission to do. There you see the big three having their birthdays. We have a supply mission to do to Rivendell 1. A resupply mission. I accepted a contract for it even to get a little bit of money from it because we might as well. It seems prudent to do that. But you'll notice we also have new launch apparatus. The first one of which results in a less than stellar launch, I would say. Not exactly what we wanted. Thankfully, we got it repaired pretty fast. Same day, actually. I think we saw Werner von Kerman out there with a hammer trying to bend things back into shape. But, he managed to fix it. So we have our Fellowship 3, not 2, because 2 just exploded. Fellowship 3 on its way over to Rivendell 1. These resupplies need to happen every year or so. Otherwise, the station runs out of, I think it runs out of water first. But speaking of life support, stay tuned for closer to the end of the video because there are a couple things that we're shifting around design-wise for a lot of these resupply missions. Anyway, we do a deorbit burn with Bob, Austin, Svetlana, and I think Sophia was the other astronaut that was on the station before. The first crew of it, actually. Bringing them down for a nice little deorbit and a re-entry back into Kerbin. I did some digging down in the mod files and stuff because I was trying to test out the nuclear reactors that Near Future Electrics adds. And it turns out that Kerbalism and Near Future Electronics clash in such a way that the fission reactors just don't work at all. So there's nothing really I can do about that. So I'm going to have to rely on solar power, RTGs eventually when we research those. And then the fusion reactors still do work, I think. I looked at their entries in the tech tree and they look like they function. They generate electricity, which is what we need because they generate power. That's why we would have put some on there. Anyway, that's all just to say that the technology for fission reactors was kind of useless for me to pick up, but what can I do? You can see the parachute popping there on our latest Duna mission. Those are our tourist ones. I talked through the whole thing, but that's mostly just because it's something that you've all seen before. We just need to bring 3 Kerbals to orbit for those, so it's not like you're missing anything new. They get us a bit of money, so we like to keep doing those tourist missions, especially going out further to places like the moon or Minmus. Get us a lot more money in general. Anyway, here on the pad, we did accept our first commercial satellite launching a satellite in orbit of the Mun for a company called Stratus Corp. And these commercial flights, these not rideshare, forgetting the word, but we are going to provide launch services for a number of people starting now, a number of organizations rather. So you did see, I think, in the last episode, the newspaper clipping at the start said something about the Pacific Union forming. And that is to say that the United Kingdom, Australia, South Africa, and California are now part of an economic and a research union with the great nation of New Zealand, and we can now provide launches to them. So expect to see in later episodes things like British satellites going into orbit, or uh, an Australian being landed on the moon, a South African going to Duna, even once we get there. That's still a little bit of a ways off, but anyway, we're on our transfer to the moon here. That nice shot of the sun going in. The orbit here proved somewhat tricky to maneuver to get to exactly because it's polar and I forgot, it was either the longitude of ascending node or descending node that it wouldn't line up because it was at a 90-degree angle. The orbit is perfectly 90 degrees. So I may or may not have possibly eventually activated the cheat menu just to complete the contract because I completed all the parameters of the orbit otherwise within like 500 meters of their target. Anyway, that monstrosity that you just saw on the screen there was our attempt at designing a sample return mission from Duna, but it was just too unwieldy for us to attempt that at this point. Our engineers don't exactly have the ability to design something that can do that. I'm sure if I spent several more hours, I probably could have designed something. But until then, we're just going for a simple atmospheric probe to enter and then land on the surface of Duna, as per our contract outlines, and then designing a very simple vacuum lander to land on Ike. It might even be able to hop around a bit, depending on what happens when we get there, but the fairing even doesn't need to be that big. Still, the launch teams need to prepare themselves for our first ever double probe launch to a single planet. Of course, we're fast forwarding to the Duna transfer, but wait a second. What's that? Good morning, New Zealand. I'm Chandler Farmer with the Kerbin News Network, bringing you an update to our breaking story earlier in the year, as Scandinavia's Hermod 1 probe, launched back on day 65, has finally completed its 105-day journey to Moho. Despite a malfunction in the orientation systems in Hermod 1, the USSA was able to achieve an eccentric but stable orbit around Moho, returning valuable data back to Kerbin. With the success of this mission, many experts believe that Scandinavia has proven that they can compete with our very own New Zealand Space Agency. Only time will tell if this is the case. This is Chandler Farmer signing off. Glory to New Zealand. Well, I suppose we have no shortage of things happening because Scandinavia is right on our tail, and with India having landed 2 astronauts on the Mun, that doesn't bode well for us maintaining a secure lead in the space race that's currently happening. But we need money still. We need a lot of cash to do some of the things we need to do, like set up bases on the moons. So we're going to launch a tourist mission to Minmus. This is our first tourist mission outside of Kerbin orbit.
T-minus 17. Final guidance release. We'll expect engine ignition at 8.9 seconds. 10, 9,
8, 7, ignition sequence started. All engines are started. We have ignition. 2, 1, 0. We have a liftoff. We have a liftoff. It is now cleared the tower.
Roger, tower. Y'all complete. We're on the roll, Bob.
Looking great. Thrust on all 5 engines.
Okay, babe, it's looking good here. Roll is complete. We are pitching.
The eagle-eared viewer may recognize that launch audio from our last episode. I try to find other videos that have good quality audio for the launch countdowns and stuff, but they just are really hard to find. That's why I haven't really been using them as much in this episode for a lot of the other missions, because really it's only Apollo for a while that has good audio, and then eventually some of the shuttle missions do, but I like to try to match up the mission profile of what's being launched in real life with what's being launched in Kerbal Space Program, if that makes any sense. Anyway, we're sending 4 Kerbals to Minmus. We haven't been back to Minmus in a while because we picked up basically all of the science that we can, at least from manned missions. If I recall, I do know that we still have a bunch of seismometer reports to pick up from the surface, maybe. That'll be something for the, unmanned probe team to figure out. Big rockets to launch things. Rockets are expensive. That's why we're doing these missions anyway. Rockets are expensive, and we need to get money. So that's why we do these tourist missions in the first place. In some of the footage there, you can see our newly designed service module with the life support containers sort of strapped around the outside in a ring. It looks better, and it's a little bit more organized than the other ones. Anyway, these Kerbals make it back home safe. And once recovering, we do need to go forward to get some things done. It is worth noting that those news updates that I've been making for this episode, I probably could have done a New Zealand accent, but my accents kind of suck usually. I still use accents when I GM my tabletop RPG games, but that's not something for you guys to figure out yet. Maybe you'll find out one day. Anyway, we have a couple more birthdays passed right there. The big 3 turning 25. They're all quite young. It's supposed to generate a random number, I think, but they all turn out like in their early 20s. But, younger's better, I guess, in this case, because that just means they have more years to live out in our glorious New Zealand space program. So here we are bringing back the Fellowship 3 crew of Revendell 1 back to Kerbin. The crew members there are brought back safely. All the parachutes deploy. Everything works fine now. Again, all these missions are routine, but never let it be said that a space mission is easy or routine, because it never is. So for our Fellowship 4 mission, we're going to strap it to a newly designed, a very old rocket, designed off of old Soviet technology. You can see a little bit of resemblance there to maybe some of the like Soyuz and stuff. Anyway, this rocket is much cheaper than the one we were using before, as well as our whole newly designed pod and service module. So it's cheaper, and that way we can actually start making a buck off of these supply missions when we accept contracts to do them. Anyway, we're launching there. All those launch clamps, I think, deploy quite nice. I like the mod that I installed for those to build custom launch pads, because it makes it look a little bit more realistic. And to play nicer with some of our cargo container parts, we are actually, from now on, going to be using full Kerbalism life support, so it's not just air and consumables now. We are going full hog into having to take care of oxygen, nitrogen, food, and water for all these missions.